Welcome back to my channel. My name is Deonis Burton. I'm a fashion and portrait photographer based out of Miami, Florida. Today we're going to be talking about color grading in Photoshop. Now, in order for this to make any type of sense to anybody, we got to first make sure we understand color. So let's click over here to our color picker and we're going to focus on hue, saturation, and brightness. There's a bunch of other options in here, but we're going to stay right in this area, okay? So first, let's talk about hue. Hue is going to be your primary color that we're going to look at. So this is your blue, your purple, your greens, your yellow, your oranges. That's it. It's just the color. Get it? It's just the color. It's nothing else. Then the saturation. Saturation is going to be the intensity of the color. So if we stay with the hue, like let's say we chose the color red and we want to change the saturation of it, we're going to go left to reduce the saturation. So go all the way to white, or, starting here. And as you drag across, you'll see this number get smaller and smaller because we're going left and we're removing saturation. Now, if we look at brightness, which is the B, as we go up and down, that value is going to change and nothing else. Okay, so brightness is going to be your B, S is saturation, H is hue. And if we go, let's say 50% brightness, 50% saturation, 50% brightness, this is going to be your midtones. Okay, so this is the darker part of your image. This is the brighter part of the image, and this is your midtones. All right, you could just kind of go over here. This is where you get the idea of 50% gray. So it's 50% is right in the middle. All right, so that's a basic understanding of color. Let's also talk about color theory. So color theory has to do with the idea of creating harmonies between colors to create a feeling, a mood, or tell a story. Now, that's very similar to how you would use color grading. But these theories are theories that have worked over the years. They've been proven to work. I'm not sure who started it, really, that kind of stuff. But the guy who created the first color wheel probably is going to get credit for that. So now we have an understanding of color. Let's talk about color theory. So color theory describes the relationship between color harmonies or different combinations of colors to create a feeling, to tell a story, or just create a vibe within an image. Now, this can be done multiple ways, and there are beginner ways, intermediate, and then there are some like really advanced ways that we're not going to talk about today. Let's just talk about the basics. So let's pull up a color wheel. You guys have seen this if you've taken any type of art class. It's just literally a wheel of colors. But similar to when we had the color picker, let's go to color picker. It's set up in a 360. So this is a circle. This is also a circle. That's why it starts with red and ends with red, because if you flatten it or put in a loop, it turns into this circle. Okay, there are a couple of basic harmonies when it comes to color theory. They are complementary, which complementary means you're going to go opposite the color. So let's say we're starting with red. The complement to red would be green. The complement to yellow would be purple. The complement to orange would be blue, so on and so forth. And then you can get into these individual smaller spots to get the complement to that one. Another option would be analogous, which means you're going to take 3 or more colors in combination. So let's say that you chose blue, purple, and magenta, or whatever this color would be, a violet or lavender. But you would take those 3 together and it would create a very specific harmony and give you a very specific feel. The same thing over here. If you chose orange, yellows, and greens, that would give you more of a warm, earthy kind of feel. But each one tells you a different story. You can also do a split complementary, which would be taking, let's say we took red. The complement to red is green, but instead of using green, you would use the colors right to the right of it and to the left of it. So it'd be red, and then this like teal color, and then this like yellow green color. And again, this can continue and continue around till you get all these different types, and there's even more the further you go into color theory. But we're going to stick with the basics today just to get you guys used to color grading on your own. Color. We talked about color theory. Let's talk about color grading itself and the different techniques. So my mindset behind color grading is not to just throw in a bunch of colors just because they fit different harmonies, or use a bunch of presets just because. Most of the times I'm shooting for a client and I'm keeping in mind the wardrobe and this the dominant color of an image. And so let's go back to the original. And within 2 clicks or 3 clicks, this what we could be done. That's literally it. It's not like super complicated. Like you don't have to do a bunch of stuff, but for the sake of teaching, let's do a bunch of stuff. So let's go into shadows. We could add some blue to the shadows, which also makes it a little dark. We can add some magenta to it, add a little more cyan and bow. One way of color grading. Let's do another color balance adjustment. So let's say instead of making the highlights cool, we want to make our highlights warm. So making our highlights warm, but then we go to our shadows and make our shadows cool. It's gonna darken the image quite a bit. As you can see, as soon as you add blue, it just darkens the whole image. And then I would probably actually just increase my shadows a little bit. It was a little too dark. But you see what that does? What that color does? Pretty straightforward. Another way of doing this would be using gradient maps. So gradient maps is probably my favorite way to do this because one, you get a visual representation of what you're doing, but also it's just very, very effective. And then there are a bunch of presets that you can use as well. So with this one, you can use what's called photographic toning, and these will work. These have all worked and they give you very specific fills that could work for your image. So how I would do it, click around till you find the one that feels right. But then you want to set the opacity down to like 18%. And you can set this to either soft light, which gives you one specific fill with a lot more contrast, or color, which is just going to add these colors to the image. Now this looks a little bit too cool for me. So let's switch it up. Let's go to something warmer. That looks nice. And you can see it's only 3 colors, and that can be your color grading. Like that can be it. Everyone can go home. You don't have to do anything else if you're happy. Another way of doing this will be using the curves adjustments. So inside of this window, you have 3 different channels. If you want to add red into the mid-tones, you will click in the middle, which is the mid-tones. This is middle tone. And you can increase the reds. That's really red. I'm not a big fan of that. It's way too much. You can also decrease the reds out of there, out of your mid-tones, which looks very pleasant. You can also take the reds out of your highlights pen, so you can add it into your highlights. The whole thing is getting super red, or you can take it out of your highlights. Now everything's getting cooler and tailer. You can do the same thing with blue. You can add blue to your highlights. You can literally see that it's blue, or you can reduce the blue out of your highlights, which makes it yellow. The other thing that you can do too is do the opposites. See, adding yellow to the shadows. You can do different points. So this image, you can add some yellows, the mid-tones. You can add some blue to the shadow, which looks a little awkward, but it works. So you're trying to find different combinations that make the most sense for you. Another way of doing this is using selective color. Selective color lets you really go in here and push around colors. So if we want to add cyan, we can add cyan. So you can see all of the things that were yellow, which is mainly back here and on these leaves. Watch the color change. So watch the color change when I move the slider to the right. All the things that were yellow got more yellow. Now I can add red by taking away cyan, and it creates a whole different vibe. Way too much cyan. So you can find some middle ground in there. So this is a very, very specific way of being able to move things. Like gives you a lot more control than using curves. At least for me, using curves or using gradient maps. Like this one is a little bit more intuitive to my brain. But again, I still prefer using gradient maps just because I've used that for so long. But the other thing that you can do is, remember how we talked about going into the mid-tones? So that would be the neutrals. So if you click on neutrals, which is represented by gray, if you add cyan, it's gonna add it to the mid-tones here. You can add some yellows, you can take out the yellows, which actually looks nice on her skin. In the darker parts of the image, now here you want to do a little bit. So you want to do like literally 2% of whatever you're going to do if you're going to go into blacks. And then highlights or the whites, you can freestyle that a little bit. It's not going to be it's a lot more forgiving. If you just look at the highlights right here on her face, you can see we're adding a bunch of yellow. Sorry, now we're adding a bunch of yellow. If we go here, we're just adding blue. So I wouldn't want to add yellow to her highlights. I don't want to change that at all. And that's color grading. Well, the foundation of color grading. Now there are many more ways to do this. And also it looks different on each different picture. So this image is really dark. That was intentional, but let's brighten the image up just for the sake of teaching today. Let's brighten up that image, just flatten it. So let's do the same thing we just did. Let's go to our gradient map. We can go here and go to photographic toning. We can choose one that makes sense to us. Her skin tone. Then we should make it warmer. And then we can set that to color and then reduce the opacity down. And now look at that, we've warmed up the image. Color grading. If we go to selective color, we can then go to the whites and say for the brighter parts of the image, we want to make it more yellow. So let's add more yellow. We want to say to our mid-tones, let's just choose this color, something more magenta, because we want to ride this. When I say ride this, I mean using that magenta as the main tone to carry the rest of the image. So the opposite of magenta would be green. So when we get to our blacks, I think that's what we should add in some greens. So instead of adding magenta, let's reduce magenta. Color grading. Again, there's multiple ways to color grade. There's multiple things to consider when color grading. I mainly try to keep in mind what the subject is wearing and the location when I'm making these decisions. But let's go to the highlights. Let's add more reds because we want this to feel more warm. Add more yellows as well. And then our shadows, we want to make our shadows. Do we like the red? Kind of feeling the red a little bit. We add in reds, yeah, and then we can add in some yellows too. Now it's super warm. Went from this is really, really cool. I mean, it's nice, but that really warm look is nice as well. I think the highlights just might be blown in general, but again, that's color grading. Now, this is a shot of my beautiful wife. I don't think I even retouched, I didn't retouch this image. This is just straight out of camera, made some minor adjustments in color and Capture One. So let's add a gradient map to it. Let's go warm. But also, before we do that, let's keep in mind what we have going on here. So we have yellow dominating the image. We have also green dominating. So the only thing that I would want to do would be something very, very subtle in the sense of adding just a little bit of a new color into the image. I don't really need to change too much because this looks like real life. And this is going to be more of a lifestyle shot. That's the other main thing to keep in mind with color grading. Keep in mind the context of the image. So this is supposed to be lifestyle. We don't need to change the color of the dress or anything, honestly, but we just need to make it fit a narrative. So let's tell ourselves that this was just going closer to sunset and it's just a much warmer environment than what it was, even though it was beautiful as it is. So we could go to our highlights. We could add red to our highlights. We can add yellow to our highlights and we could be done. Color grading, done. Then you just do your retouching. You can use a gradient map to complete this same thing. Let's delete this old one, even though I didn't use it for anything. Let's go here. Let's put red in our shadows, yellow here, but let's make this red really dark. So I want to darken down the trees a little bit. Also, red and green are complementary, and the yellow is already dominating the image. So let's push more yellows into the image, and let's change that yellow to something a little more desaturated so it's not as harsh. And then we can set this to color, bring opacity down, whole different feel than what we had before. You guys see it, color grading is simple, doesn't have to be overly harsh. And this is where a lot of your presets come in. They're just trying to these different fillings to your image, but you can do this stuff by yourself. So that's just a warmer one. This one has more reds in it. We can also do one that has a little more blue to it as well, just to keep things cool. So for that one, let's click on one of these already set up images or these presets, kind of feeling that again, we just want to make it cooler. Let's set it to soft light this time instead of color and see how it affects the image. Beautiful. The other thing is you can combine them together as well. So that combination works out really nice. So we added warmth to the image here, and then we add a little contrast. I think that works. Now how you stack these makes a difference too. And then here I would want to make it even warmer if we're going to go that route. Yeah. Again, color grading is fun. A lot of it's intuitive, and it's just keeping context of what's going on, keeping in mind color theory to a degree, and then going from there. Now this image was one of my favorites of last year. Got a ton of attention. I knew even when I shot it, it was gonna be dope just because the arrangement, the models that we use, the colors of the swimwear, everything just worked itself out. So let's add some color grading to this. Let's make this whole thing warmer. I like making a lot of my images warmer. We can do that by kind of doing what we just said, or let's actually do this. Let's go to, yes. I guess it's similar to what I was already doing, but that one's already been chosen. And then we can set this to soft light and then reduce it. And now look at the image. It is a lot warmer in a beautiful way. And that can be it. That's your color grade. We can also duplicate this. Let's use it on color. We'll set the blending mode to color. You see how that changed the entire feel? Like that turquoise is gone now. It's a much muddier color, so I wouldn't probably do that. Probably would stick with just this one if I was gonna change it. Let's go to this image. Now this image is a lot cooler. The highlights are very bright. They're probably blown out. This is an older image, so don't judge me, guys. But let's go to color balance. Let's go to our mid-tones, because I can already tell that adding warmth there would be the key to making this image pop even more. Add some reds, add a little bit of yellow. We're good to go. I didn't even have to change the blending mode. Leaving it on normal actually worked out. I will be happy with this moving forward. But as you can see, color grading is not always heavy, it's not always intense, it's not always dramatic. It really depends on what you're doing, the context of the image, and where you want to use this image. So if you guys have any questions, please leave them below. Your comments are helpful as far as me knowing what to work on next with you guys, and also so I can actually help you grow as a photographer and as a retoucher. Leave a like and make sure you subscribe if you haven't to as well. Be on the lookout for new videos. And until the next one, also, before we get to that part, remember, I know we're out here creating for other people. We're creating for our friends, our families, our clients. We're keeping other people happy in regards to our art. But make sure you're taking time to create for yourself. All right, peace. Oh, one more thing. Next workshop in person, Miami, March 1st or 2nd.